Everybody. Good
Hey,
evening.
kid.
Welcome everyone to episode 551 of Line Upon Line. The biblical historian Luke, the apostle, reveals the actual birth period of Jesus. And tonight we have Kelly with us. We have Stan, and as always, Dr. Ricks. If you would start us out, that would be wonderful.
Okay, because of the Great Lake effect, terrible storms and ice are sweeping parts of the country and the Rocky Mountains. So let's have some ice sports joke. We're going to have some hockey jokes. So you can tell how sophisticated you are by laughing at hockey jokes, showing that you understand hockey. Okay, why do hockey players date smart women? Opposites attract. Where do hockey players get most of their money? The Tooth Fairy. Why do hockey players make friends so fast? They're good at breaking the ice. And what is the ghost favorite position on a hockey team? His favorite position is the goalie. And this is a short one, but it's my piece de resistance. Here it is. What difference is there between pro wrestling and pro hockey? What's the difference? The difference is in hockey, the fights are real. Or at least they used to be.
Quick hockey story. I got one. I used to take Dolores to sporting events. I tried taking her to baseball. She couldn't stand it. She'd fall asleep. I took her to football. I took her to all kinds of sporting events till one day I took her to the local hockey farm club. By the second period, she's standing on a seat yelling, "Hit somebody." So I found her sport. She's a little more violent, a little put back on that one, but
hey. Taking out some frustration.
Maybe she's yelling, "Hit somebody."
Hey, I have a hockey story. My younger son, is kind of built like a football player, doesn't like football. So we got him into ice hockey because they played on Sunday. It was a Sabbath thing, but we were playing Evansville. That's Cape Girardeau, playing Evansville. It's a bigger town. And all the parents were up in the stands watching it. It was so exciting as they went they go back and forth on the ice, a pretty good speed. You'd be surprised. I think he was about 13, 14 years old. They're pretty big kids. And, they scream, and it was so exciting. And we lost. But the only goal scored by Cape was done by my son. And he picked up one of the other players because he was so much stronger than a lot of them to celebrate. It's one of the few great sporting moments. We lost, but still, my son scored the only goal for Cape. Anyway, okay, well, not that I really fully understand it either. I don't like some of the refs' calls, but what do I know, right? I think that people can be kind and relaxed this Christmas season and not worry about your spiritual purity. Just kind of be kind. You don't have to be mean to people who say Merry Christmas, or if your family has a big dinner and you want to go. I mean, if you don't want to go, don't go. You can tell them the truth. I'm not sending Christmas gifts or Christmas cards, but I love you. So don't worry about Christmas. I think true believers should relax and take Christmas just like any other day.
Is there anything wrong with Christmas? I guess we asked that question over the many years in the church. Most of the people that are probably watching this program here are fully aware of what Christmas means, but we asked that question over and over again for the 60 years of my life, and I know Dr. Rick, you probably longer in the ministry and in the Church of God. I grew up in the church. I've never been in a household that kept Christmas, so it's natural for me to not observe Christmas. But it's comes as a surprise even after all these years when someone asks me, "What are you going to do for Christmas?" and I tell them I don't keep Christmas. I still get this shocked look like there's someone out here who doesn't actually keep Christmas, and even had people ask me, "What do you don't believe in Jesus Christ?" I mean, it's that foreign to them when you start talking about this subject here, and we're going to hopefully discuss some of this tonight. But I wanted to pose the question up front: is it okay with God to keep Christmas, and does God mind? And is there anything wrong with keeping Christmas? And I'll just leave it at that for the further discussion.
By the way, if somebody asks me, have you done your Christmas shopping? What I've been saying for the last few years, I've done. I don't have anything left to do. Nothing. Well, I've finished it all. I have nothing to do. And so they don't know whether I keep it or not, but because I don't feel like discussing it with them too much. But if you do, if you think they're really open-minded, but you're right, Ken. I mean, Stan, most people are not open-minded.
No. I
Hmm.
have a standard response that I've been giving for I can't remember how long. I just, when they wish me a happy Christmas or Merry Christmas, I just tell them enjoy your holiday, and
Yeah,
I move
I think-
on. And they're usually fine with that. I don't get no pushback really, and there's a few people that know, but most people, I mean, you're wasting your time arguing with them. They're not. You might as well be speaking another language to them. If you're, trying to explain what you do, it doesn't compute. Like Stan said, it's just not going through their heads. They can't conceive that a Christian doesn't celebrate what they think is Christ's birthday.
I mean, the number of years I've been in the church, I think, I mean, I'm sure other people have too, but I've run a complete gambit. I mean, when I first started out, I was gung ho, wanting to explain it to everybody. And then as time went on, you realize you can't do it, especially this time of year. This is not the time of year to try to have conversations about Christmas.
No.
I mean, they're all geared up and all. So I finally got to the point where when somebody goes, hey, Merry Christmas, I'm like, well, thank you. Because I look at it as they're trying to be nice.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. It has nothing to do. I'm not saying I support you with Christmas or anything else. I appreciate you taking your time to be nice to me. And that's, and that's it. And, then later on, if we get to people I know or more in depth and stuff, there's, time for conversations. But for the most part, they're going to do what they're going to do because they don't realize the issues. And, and they are surprised that, well, what's wrong with, why would you not celebrate Christ's birth? Mm-hmm. They just don't get it.
On the front steps of Walmart is not the place when somebody's holding a bag of presents to say, "Don't you know Christmas is pagan?"
Yeah, they're $2,000 into their Christmas shopping, and they don't want to hear from you, bah humbug. Now, in my defense, I've always been bah humbug long before I was in the church. I've always been considered the Grinch. I mean, since I was very young, because I never seen the point in it. And I never cared for it. I mean, people were buying presents for people they didn't like and don't see them but once a year, or they only support the poor people at Christmas time. I said, they're starving in July, the same as they're starving in December. I mean, I was just Mr. Grinch about stuff like that.
It's a lot of pressure on people this time of the year, because of, the stress of knowing that they've got to buy for everybody in their family, and they may not be financially able to do that, and even more so today. But, I got to buy everything, and I got to buy the right thing for everybody. And I want, I don't want to be left feeling, like I didn't do enough or buy the right things. Did I leave anybody off? All of those things create a lot of stress on people this time of year. And, most people that really enjoy Christmas time, is a family event and love to be together with their family. And I understand that part of it, but the whole concept is become very commercialized to the point to where it creates all kinds of, extra stress that really shouldn't be associated with any time of the year, in my opinion. But
we did a program once years ago about, we mentioned how suicide rates go up, depression goes up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, your credit card gets topped off and you're
Go
paying it
up.
off for a year. I mean, we
Yeah.
we did a program a long time ago on that. So it's just not, there's there's all kinds of good feelings. I mean, people manage to well up some good feelings, but they're misdirected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pretty much starting at Thanksgiving, I stay out of town. Because I went a few times. It's just unbelievable how some people just behave. And people you look at. I remember I went to one store and it was a little old lady, and she got violent with somebody because they had gotten the last of whatever it was she wanted. She was grabbing it, trying to jerk it out of their hands, and I'm standing there looking at this little old lady just going to town. I'm like,
Merry
crazy.
Christmas.
Yeah, remember the what were those things? Cabbage Patch Kids during
Yes.
Christmas back in the
Oh
80s.
yeah,
They were killing each other over those things.
Yeah.
there was stampedes.
I don't know why you wouldn't want to keep something like that.
Like all the Black Friday videos you see after they open the doors at the Walmart and people are beating each other over a TV,
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's gotten a little better. But by the way, I'll just give a little bit of background. If you read Luke 1:5 to Luke 2:8, Zachariah, one of the top priests, the priests were divided up into courses. There are about 13, 14 days each one. Actually, David set all this up. And you can read about it in 1 Corinthians 24:10. But he was in the course of Abijah. And if you want to think of it this way, in the Hebrew year, the first month or the first course for the priest would be in March. And then you rattle off about 15 weeks. And his course was the 8th course. That would put you June 18th to July 1st. So that's important because as a historian, Luke nails down something that can give us solid evidence of when Christ was born. Ken, would you read Luke 1:13, please?
But the angel said unto him, Thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. And many of the children of Israel shall he turn to the Lord their God. And it came to pass that as soon as the days of his ministration were accomplished, he departed to his own house. And after those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived.
So the logic is, because they spent a whole bunch of time at the temple, so now they get to go back home and do their regular life. So she conceived in July. That's the more logic, because that's pretty much what it said, and the experts agree. So, and we know from Luke 1:26 to 38, you can read about it, that John the Baptist was 6 months older than Christ. By the way, an interesting thing is when Christ was probably just a few days old inside Mary, when the angel told her about her cousin, she went visit Elizabeth. And when the two women got close to each other, the fetuses, especially John, who was bigger, of course, than 6 months, he jumped up and down her belly and celebrated being in the presence of the Messiah. And the reason that's interesting, people always think of babies in the womb as just being a lump of flesh to be aborted.
Mm-hmm.
But John the Baptist was doing his thing even before he was born.
Yeah. It was a miraculous conception anyway, because, we read later on that they were very elderly people. It says that she was, she was sort of hid out her pregnancy because it was a little, I don't know whether it was a stigma or a little bit embarrassing, but, it tells us that she was in her, she was elderly, that she was an older woman. And it almost reminds me of the time when Abraham at his, up in 99 years old, when he was promised a son, he was going to have it in his old age, as it uses that terminology about her as well, but in her old age. So it was a miraculous birth. I heard this woman today who was being interviewed, who was one of these ladies who was going to have an abortion, and she went in to have a a sonogram. They offered free to her a sonogram. And when she saw the image moving around, peanut-sized image, she wasn't all that moved. But when she heard the heartbeat, that's when it struck a chord with her that this is a human being. And she went on to have her children, and was, of course, later on very glad that she had her children and didn't go through with it.
Yeah. And a lot of people think it's easier on the woman. If you carry that baby a fair amount of time, I think abortions are just a little bit more dangerous than natural childbirth.
Yeah.
Because hospitals are pretty good now, unlike 100 years ago. Very few women die in childbirth now. And abortion can be dangerous to your health. Women die in abortion clinics. They keep it quiet, but they do.
We have a few people asking a question in the chat room. They want to know about Hanukkah. Let's see what you gentlemen have to say about Hanukkah.
I believe it's in John 10, but you can double check it. Apparently, Christ kept Hanukkah. I look at Hanukkah, they celebrate the Maccabees' victory over I forgot the title, but they were some Greek empire or the Syrians, whatever the exact title were. And they got their freedom. And actually, they were semi-free for many centuries. It's like their 4th of July. I don't think it's wrong for Jews to celebrate their 4th of July. And if you want to celebrate the Jewish 4th of July, I don't think God would mind it. And if that's, so that'd be my excuse to keep Christmas. I'll call it Hanukkah.
Well, I think it's sort of akin to, the salvation that was brought to Israel, the Jewish people, by Esther. That one event. They celebrated that, and they still do celebrate that fact that, had it not been for Esther and of course God's intervention, that the Jews would have been annihilated. And so the Maccabees story is another account where, if it hadn't been for John Maccabees and his sons, bringing the people to, a state to resist what was happening, then, and fleeing up into the mountains, they fought in the mountains for some period of time. And even when he died, his sons took over. And so, it's sort of a celebration of overcome, a victory, like we might celebrate Memorial Day for the soldiers in our nation today. And I think it's been by public opinion, because of its proximity to December the 25th, sort of associated with Christmas, but it really isn't a Christmas celebration at all.
Hanukkah has been there, at least as far as America is concerned. Hanukkah has been there long before Christmas was. And, the story is that when the Maccabees cleansed the temple from all the abomination that the bad guys had put on the temple, that they didn't have enough oil to keep the menorah that's inside, the big one that's inside the temple, going. It burned for 8 days on its own. At least that's the tradition. Yeah. In other words, God performed a miracle and showed how pleased he was that they cleansed the temple. By the way, I saw that, do you know that Pete Hegseth said this in 2017? He said, in a hotel speech he was given, he said, the Jews aren't really back until they build the third temple. And I saw the video of it. And the thought occurred to me, why is Satan so intent on keeping him from getting in the cabinet? Could that be part of the reason? And I realize Hegseth probably can't push that now because he wasn't a cabinet member then, so he could say anything he wanted without worrying about the repercussions. But the fact that he thinks that, do you see what I mean?
I wanted to mention before I forget too that the story, if you're not familiar with the story of the Maccabees revolt or whatever, it's sort of placed between the testaments in the Bible, in history, between the time of the prophets and before the canon of the New Testament. Sometime you'll find these in pages listed between the testaments, and it'll talk about that history there. But that predated Jesus Christ and his birth. I mean, it was long before Jesus was ever born that that event actually took place that they celebrate. And the idea of Christmas came about in the 4th century.
Yeah, Christ Mass. But yeah, it's a different thing. Ken, would you read Luke 1:34, please?
Then Mary said, therefore also that Holy One who is to be born will be called the Son of God. Now indeed, Elizabeth, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age. This is now the 6th month of her who was called barren.
And the way to look at it in a real quick way is John was conceived in the summer, born in the spring. Christ is 6 months younger than John. So you put 6 months on to the spring birth of John, and 6 months from March, April, put you in September, October, which is the fall holy days. That's when Christ was born. And this is based on biblical evidence, not just tradition. And I think strong believers can ignore paganism, says the Apostle Paul. I think we can use these scriptures to say we can ignore Christmas. My problem is, I was never big into Christmas. I'll tell you later why, but it's the music that gets me. I'm in a store and they start playing, I won't go into the very song, but it starts ringing in my head. And I just, it's like you can't get it out of your head, at least while you're around all that stuff. But I figure, well, I guess there's not much you can do about it, right?
And that's when I growing up, those are some of the first songs that I ever memorized and knew. So I always liked it when Christmas came around because I knew the songs and I would sing along. And now when I'm in the stores and stuff, there are certain songs that, they get in your head. Next thing you know, you kind of walking along humming them. And you're like, what am I doing?
It's an automated response. I mean, I don't have a choice sometimes. It just hits me.
All right. But I mean, I don't burst into flames or anything.
No.
It's not that I set out to do it. I don't set out to play music. And, now.
Which is surprising for you, though, that you didn't burst into flames.
But now my wife, she can't stand it because she hates anything. It's just repetitive like that. And it starts so soon. I mean, we were driving down the road the other day and she was listening to a country music station and a Christmas song came on and she goes, oh yeah. And then she hits another station and she says she flips between the two because they're never playing it at the same time. So that's how she avoids it. She just flips radio stations. Me, I would have just ignored it and kept on going because it'll be over with, and go on. But some people don't, they don't like hearing it. They don't like, and it's not because of religious issues. They just don't like hearing that music over and over and over again, starting back in October.
Yeah, and it's going to be, you better be nice, naughty and nice. Doesn't that song stick in your mind from when you were a little kid?
Sure.
And I was naughty. I wasn't nice, so. But I think we can ignore it. The issue they had was meat offered to pagan idols, and the meat wasn't labeled. If you went to a butcher, shambles, or shop in city of Rome or Corinth, you said to the butcher, which one of these pieces of meat have not been before the temple of Zeus or Saturn or something? You couldn't trust what they said. They couldn't care less. What do you want to hear? So they realized they don't know, and they probably could care less. So that you couldn't trust the meat. But here's the weird thing. Some people thought the idol was in the meat. I know we're laughing at our age, but that's how they felt. It's sort of like the wafer that you pop. Some people think it instantly turns into the real flesh and blood. You get the point. When you eat that meat at the pagan temple, Saturn or Zeus or Venus is in you. And people grew up that way, and so they were afraid of the meat. So let's look at what Paul told them. Romans 14, then Corinthians 8, please, Ken.
Okay. Him that is weak in the faith, receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations. For One believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak eateth herbs. And now, as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth.
And what Paul is saying is the strong people, and they were correct, they knew the idol is nothing. There's no spiritual connection. It's just whatever it was, a hunk of wood coated with gold, big statue, whatever it was. It was absolutely nothing. And it could have no effect on the meat or the wine, whatever. But there were some people who were probably relatively new, who were probably God-fearers, that still had an emotional connection to the idol.
And they had already jettisoned that, and it was very difficult for them to deal with that idea that, because it was like smoking. It's like the smoker. I always use this example. Someone who quits smoking is the worst critic about other smokers than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they smoke for 20 years, they quit, they go in a restaurant, and all of a sudden cigarette smoke is the worst thing they've ever smelt in their whole life. And they will throw a fit. They will insist that somebody open a window, go outside. They're very, they're very unaccepting of someone else that may be trapped in that habit of smoking cigarettes.
They're rude.
And so they pushed this, what was once a habit of theirs, all the way to the nth degree away from them. And so the idea that it could somehow infect them once again, I think, creates this atmosphere. And this has happened in religion before. And even modern history of the church, I've seen this happen. People have jettisoned things that they believed were eye-opening to them, such as Christmas, and they jettisoned it so far out that the idea of hearing Christmas music or seeing something Christmas is such an abomination to them that they have no tolerance for anybody else that might be, still observing Christmas. And so they are the same way. They're entirely rude. They are point blank confrontational to people on the front of Walmart who might be out on a Christmas shopping spree with their family and children. And it's not the place and the time, as we discussed earlier, to do that. But they have no tolerance for anyone who's blinded by the fact that Christmas has pagan origins, and all the accoutrements of Christmas can be traced back before the time of Christ to, ancient Egypt and Assyria and Babylon and Rome, whatever. But are you going to go through all of that history right there on the steps of Walmart or a shopping center or wherever and try to get somebody converted right there on the spot? No. It's going to have to be a revelation from Jesus Christ, just as it was for each of us.
Yep.
So
that's a real good point, Stan. And I was thinking, and when you read Romans 14, Paul goes into a little more detail, but the people who were afraid of the meat were so energized, they became vegetarians. They wouldn't touch a bite of meat because we can't be sure. And they would argue, the weak people now would argue with the strong people, you shouldn't be eating meat in the city of Rome or Corinth, two examples. And I think like you said, I think I understand it. And Paul just said, you all should leave each other alone. And read the whole chapter of Romans 14, but you get the general ideas. Leave each other alone. Don't fight over meat or food. And I think he left the implication, because he did say that the vegetarians were weak. He left the implication, well, give them some time and they'll grow out of it, hopefully.
Garner Ted did a real good sermon years ago called Baby in the Bathwater, where he kind of goes through what Stan was saying. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't be that kind of person that just makes you. It just makes you people standoffish against you, and nothing you tell them is gonna. They're ignore anything you have to say. Yeah.
I mean, growing up, Christmas was a big time of year for our family. I mean, Dad went nuts over Christmas and stuff, buying presents and stuff. So that was just part of my life. And as I started learning the truth, I was like, I started doing what humans will do. I'm like, well, Christmas, Christ was not born on Christmas. This is not his birthday. This has nothing to do with him. But it's just giving gifts. There's nothing wrong with giving gifts. Give presents. And so for a long time, that's what I did. I didn't keep Christmas as a religious holiday. I just kept it as a time to get together with family and give presents and all that. But again, as I grew and grew spiritually, you realize that no, you can't walk on that fence.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to have it both ways and you can't. And so again, I had to grow into that to where I'm like, no presents. We're done with that. And, it took some time. And so it does, like Stan said, you have to grow into it and people have to do it on their own time. So me trying to berate somebody or straighten my family out or whatever, you're first of all, you're wasting your time and you're going to turn some people's hearts hard that don't want to hear anything you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
By the way, one thing, not that we did as well as we should have, but try to make the Feast of Tabernacles a time to give gifts to your kids and let them have fun. And we had that special child's raffle this year at the feast. You would be shocked to see how these 8, 9, 10-year-olds were jumping when they won a prize or a toy. It's like, well, anyway, I was going to say it's like Christmas in the summer and the fall, but really they really loved the attention and the gifts. And so maybe that's the time to do it. But I don't think we can go to the extreme that the world does. You just spoil them with too many gifts, but try to make the feast special for kids if we can.
Mm-hmm.
No, I had somebody one time that I was talking to, and he had talked to his wife about not keeping Christmas anymore. And they had a discussion, and she made the statement that, I want my kids to have the memories that I have of Christmas. It was a wonderful time. Those are wonderful memories. And at the time, I didn't really have an answer for him. But later on, I realized, I'm like, but that's what we're doing for the feast. We're making memories. Those memories are our memories of a great time with family. And it's 8 days versus your one.
Yeah.
So there are great memories in the feast. And that tends to be what happens when you remove one thing, you've got to put something else in its place, or people will put stuff there regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you just got to think about, the feast, people who haven't kept the feast, it's hard to understand, but it's a wonderful time with family and friends and fellowship in a godly environment. And it's just wonderful and great memories that you build. And my memories of that are much better than the memories I have of when I kept Christmas and with the family and when I was younger, because all that was about was getting gifts. It wasn't about anything else. It was just about, what am I getting? Where's my present? So, it wasn't anything good for me as a child to really do, because it was all about materialism. And, with the feast, it's different. And yeah, we gave our daughter, we would give her presents and stuff. And I'm doing that with my granddaughters now. We'll give them a little present or something each day. And usually it's something they can take to church and sit there and play with. So it's something new. So it helps keep them, calm and in church, so they don't disrupt things. But, it's a wonderful time that you can do. And it's in the Bible. It's what God tells us to do. So, sometimes you can just talk about the feast that way. Just like if somebody wants to share about their Christmas, about how they did stuff, then, hey, I'll share about the feast. We went and did this, and we went on a big dinner cruise or whatever it might be. And, they're sharing. So it opens the door for us to share if you're doing it in the right frame. And,
Ken, would you read 1 Corinthians 8, 9 to 11? Yeah, I enjoy that, Kelly and the father. And the kids' experience will have a little bit of a spiritual meat to it, too.
I was going to say, my kids will never forget when Ray Fain turned the meeting building into a free candy store for the feast.
Wow.
He worked at a distributor or something. He brought bulk candy of every kind. Every kind known to man to the feast, and they could go in there and just get what they wanted when the building was open. And they'll never forget that as long as they had better Christmas. All right, 1 Corinthians. But take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak. For if any man see thee which has knowledge sit at meat in the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? And through thy knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died.
Now, when you hear that, you think some of them, I guess, they looked at the idol's temple as just art and architecture. Didn't mean a thing to them. And since we assume the excess meat would be cheap, it'd be a good place to get a good meal. And probably if you lived in Rome or Corinth, you could probably have luncheons with your worldly business contacts. It's probably a good place to do business. But I can see where someone who has an emotional attachment to that idol and that temple, if they followed your example, they'd get sucked back into it.
I think Paul really is giving the example here to the strong too. I mean, he's really speaking to those who are well grounded, and he's really saying to them, even though there's nothing wrong, or you're not committing any sin by going in there and eating that meat, because we know the idol is nothing. It's a piece of wood or stone. But if you do it and you offend the weaker brethren and you cause them to stumble, then there's a problem by doing that. You really are not committing sin by going in there, but to cause a brother to fall as a result of your actions, that might be considered construed as something that is not right. And so you got to be careful about taunting your weaker brethren and telling them, well, look at me, I've got all the answers and I know it all, and I've already been down this 20, 30, 40 years, and so don't come to me with your your accusations about what's right and wrong. Just as Dr. Rick said earlier, you got to be patient, you got to be gentle, you got to be like the old proverbial butterfly I used in a sermon here not too long ago. You pick a butterfly up and you've already damaged its wings. That's how gentle you got to be with someone who's new in the faith. You got to be patient, let them come along, and think of them as sort of like a child, your own child. You're not going to disown them because they don't understand. You're going to bring them along until they get to the age where they do understand.
And I take two additional things from that. One is we can relax, even if you're around a lot of decorations that, like mistletoe and things that may have pagan connotations, you can just ignore them. But if you're very vulnerable to Christmas parties and that influence, and you're fairly new, you probably should be cautious and avoid them. Because I'm not weak. Who, me? Well, you might be weak to certain things, right? If you think you are weak to Christmas parties, then you should avoid them.
I think you've always got to be careful with things. I mean, it's like I said, I was knew Christmas was wrong, had nothing to do with Christ, but I was going right along, and, anybody looking at me wouldn't have been able to tell I wasn't keeping Christmas because I was doing the presents and all that. So you got to be careful, and you got to look at what you're doing. And, again, that's what I did. I realized, hey, you're playing a game here that you shouldn't be playing, and you need to just stop. But I had to come to that conclusion myself. If you tried to tell me that, we'd have had a great big debate, and I'd have showed you how you were wrong.
I'm sure you would have.
Yeah. So, but so you got to let people come to it. But people need to understand that when anytime, even those who, when we think we're strong, you've got to look at what you're doing and kind of look at it and analyze it. Are you being honest with yourself, or are you lying to yourself?
I was saying, Ken, we could probably skip Romans 14:19, since we sort of mentioned that about don't destroy your brother for meat. Let's go to Romans 15:1 and 2. This is kind of the principle that Paul is telling the strong brethren, like you said, Stan.
We then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let every one of us please his neighbor for his good to edification.
Pleasing your neighbor is not a natural thing.
Dr. Rich, you probably know the origin of the story, but it was the soldier, I think it was in Vietnam, who wrote the song or wrote the story about he was carrying a soldier that was wounded, and they said, so I asked him the question, isn't he heavy? And they go, he's not heavy, he's my brother. It's always been a great story to me that and Paul is essentially saying that right here. He's saying, yeah, I know they don't know it all, and I know they don't understand it all, but they're my brother. And so I'm going to bear their infirmities until they understand and can do better. That means bear their infirmities means you got to tolerate them with their, the maybe not having complete, clear understanding about the truth, but they got to have time to come along and until they mature spiritually. Yes. But even in their weakness, they're still your brother.
Yep, that's good because it happens in both directions. In other words, it happens where they go. Sometimes when they're first into the church, they go way off to the one side, way off to an extreme in one direction, or they don't catch up to where they should be in the other direction. It's kind of interesting to watch that process because I did both of those things, and not understanding at first and not taking, certain days off as serious as I should have, and then going too far with, like the don't swat a fly, almost never that bad, but on the Sabbath, that sort of thing. But there's a once you get to a certain point in the faith, you get comfortable in understanding where we fit and where the path that Christ wants us to walk is.
Balance.
The balance. You got it.
Not being intolerant,
Right.
but the balance that you find, just like Jesus did when he was walking through plucking the grain. He could have came along and had been this stern, harsh Jewish person, just like the priests and the Pharisees and the Sadducees were, and he sort of realigned where Christianity ought to be. And it wasn't that harsh, intolerant lifestyle, but it was more of one. It was forgiving and loving and kind and long suffering, as he is called. And we should be the same way.
By the way, there's one more piece of evidence about Christmas that's in Luke's book, and it's about the shepherds and the sheep were outside at night. The thing out at night is the most important thing. Ken, would you read Luke 2:7 and 8, please?
And she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night.
I want to make a point. Why would you build mangers? And that's a type of barn, but with different sections. But why would you build mangers and not have your herd in them at night in the middle of winter? By the way, it does snow in Jerusalem because of the altitude. And even around here, any of you notice how cold the nights get?
Yeah. You got to wonder why verse 8 is even in there. Why put that verse in there at all? It doesn't serve any purpose but to tell people that it couldn't have been cold when this happened because they were out in the country living out in the fields. Why is that verse necessary unless you're sending a message about being outside and it's not cold?
Because at night, it gets really cold. You wouldn't even bother to build mangers if you're going to not put the sheep in there at night in the middle of winter. That's what you put them in.
Right.
And so the fact that outside it had to be, moderate temperature. I know they have nice wool coats and probably the shepherds have nice heavy coats, but still, around here, boy, if you're out at night this time of year, you're going to end up, Some nights you'd get frostbitten.
I have also in sort of read between the lines in that passage of scripture. Personally, I've just sort of looked at that and thought, were the inns always full in Bethlehem? I mean, did people travel like they do today? So what in the world were all of these people in town in the hotel rooms during that time? Well, if you look at what we believe is the actual birth time of Jesus Christ, would have been around the time of the Feast of Tabernacles.
Yep.
These people were traveling. They were making their way down to Jerusalem, and that may have been part of the reason why these rooms were all full, is because of the time setting and when Jesus was actually born. So, I mean, that's sort of reading between the lines, and I admit that, but it's interesting that was there any time of the year you would go there and all the rooms would be empty? But it wasn't this time of year.
And you could argue, well, couldn't they have set up a booth made of branches and leaves? Yeah, but if you're having a baby, I don't think you'd want to do that, right? You want to be in a building. But also, I think God did want the Messiah born in, let's say, non-royal circumstances. It makes him more man of the people. I don't know, does that make any sense? Be born in common circumstances instead of in a royal palace, which God could have arranged that too if he wanted it.
Well, he went to a lot of trouble to ensure that the fulfillment of that prophecy that he would be born in Bethlehem occurred. I mean, when you think about the fact that they left because they were afraid that Jesus was going to get killed, they went all the way to Egypt, and they're just now making their journey back from Egypt. You know, I mean, the circumstances surrounding the fact that, you know, the pregnancy and if it hadn't been, I believe, for God's intervention, they probably would have been born in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't. He was born in Bethlehem, or at least in some other city. But he may ensure that it was there in Bethlehem that he was born. So that's this really interesting story how that all came about. It's almost as if God was thwarting Satan's plan to try to disrupt the fact that the prophecy had been given to that he would be born in Bethlehem, but he certainly was.
Mm-hmm.
There are 109 prophecies in the Old Testament about Christ. He fulfilled every one, including being born in Bethlehem, raised in Galilee, and anyway, a lot of them you wouldn't even notice it. So you think about it and you see, there it is, Bethlehem mentioned. And you wouldn't have thought about it, but you realize that's important because that's where Christ is to be born. Anyway, and raised in Galilee, a light founding. Anyway, it's just interesting. It proves the Bible fits together like a hand and glove.
The more you dig into it, the more absurd some of the stuff is that they put together with Christ's birth, like the three kings. We know it doesn't mention how many. And they show up, 2 years or a year and a half after he was born, something like that,
right?
Instead of while he's a baby. And
they found him in the house. It says, not in the manger, in the house. Is where they came to visit Mary, and so the baby was already a year and a half to 2 years old by then. That's also missed or never mentioned in the nativity scenes, as you would see in the.
Yep.
In the cities.
The next question is, most of you know this, but I'll go through it quickly. Why was December 25th chosen for the day that they would celebrate the Christ Mass? Well, we know that Constantine combined two religions, Christianity and Sol Invictus. Christianity was growing, had a lot of power. He felt he needed that to help run the empire, but to keep the Roman citizens who still liked many of their pagan traditions, he could blend them so he could, basically when the sunlight was turning around from getting more sunlight, if you're a sun worshiper, that was the day, the birth of the sun god. Well, they could make it the birth of Christ. Now that fits so perfectly. And then they can use Easter for sunrise service. You see how that fits the sun worship? It's like resurrection. I mean, in one sense, he's adding to the worship of God some pagan traditions. I do think, and so Christmas is on the day of the winter solstice or Saturnalia. This might be a little controversial. I do think I like those who celebrate Christmas more than those who say, we want to go back to the pure paganism. We want to celebrate the winter solstice. We want to take religion out of Christmas. I'm thinking, that's like going to pure paganism. Isn't that worse?
Yeah. Well, that's what, you know what? I mean, they got it back to where they wanted it. Think about it. They added him in to get it going. Right. I mean, they don't know what they're doing, but I mean, they added Christ, they plugged him into their pagan holiday. Now they're pulling him back out so they can get all their pagan stuff back without having to, worry about all the Christian stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's even worse. And I know higher ed has gone that way for some time, but others, you see this drift to get religion. Like they used to have Good Friday. They still keep it, but now they have a complicated name for it, but it's just an extra day out of school. They've taken any religious references completely out of academic calendars. It's all about the winter solstice, the spring equinox, and we're going to celebrate those days. Can you see that's more pure paganism?
Yeah, where Dolores worked, there was some woman who was a pagan or something. And they knew Dolores was, that we kept different holy days, and that she didn't do with Christmas. And the subject come up, and she said it was pagan. And the pagan that's at the place said, "Yeah, we keep Christmas all the time, every year." And she's a pagan. She was a witch or Wiccan or pagan or something like that. Yeah, she's right. The pagans keep that. We call it this or what, Saturnalia or whatever. But yeah, she's right. We got all the same stuff that you guys got, the Santa Claus type character and all the same accoutrements and things. And the women at where she worked were like, really?
They just take Christ's name out.
Yeah.
It's like I saw this article in the newspaper, and they're responding to people that say, well, wait a minute. They only chose December 25th because it's the day of the worshiping the sun god. And they went about Tannenbaum and some other Christmas tradition. And they said, hey, that's wonderful. We're celebrating human tradition. We're celebrating mankind. It's wonderful. Like, we don't need Christ in the Bible in here. They thought it was good. Old Tannenbaum. Anyway, you get the general idea.
Right.
It's a proven point that Constantine was a sun worshiper.
Yep.
And he was trying to incorporate, as Dr. Rick said here, he was trying to bring in these pagans and unite this church in Rome into one body. And one of the things that they were trying to do as well, I think it's important, is they were trying to get rid of anything that smacked of Judaism. And so therefore, for them to pick this idea of the Sunday worship or the worship of the sun, it's sort of a play on words, even in our language, that a sun worshiper or the worship of the sun, SON, it's sort of strange. But I also think that wasn't it smart of Satan to bring about this camouflage? I mean, he pulled off one of the greatest shell tricks in all of history that's affected us from the 3rd century or the 4th century here. It was a deceptive tactic that fell on an unsuspecting world that sort of melded together paganism with false Christianity and put the name of God on it. And that's where we are today. I mean, we have gone from this idea of utter paganism, and we painted it with this paint called Christianity, which was not even true Christianity, it was false Christianity. And that's what we, and I say we, I'm talking about the general public, observes and worships today, and they have no concept of what happened in that time frame. And I guess that's what we've tried to unwrap and unveil over the course of the Church of God is to just get people. We're not trying to attack people because they worship Christmas. We're just trying to get them to look at the facts and make your own mind up and look at where these elements of Christmas came from. I mean, really step back away from it and say, is this what God truly wants me to do? Or is this something that may have, I mean, if you look at all the origins of all the things, of the bulbs and the trees, I was going to read this one scripture to you here where it says in Isaiah, or Jeremiah, excuse me, it says, for the customs of the people are vain, for one cuts a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of a workman with an axe. Sound familiar? They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers that it moves not. And of course, he was dealing with paganism and the things that had affected the worship of their pagan gods and trees and things that were more prevalent in that ancient world than they are today. But you might wonder, but as it compares with worshiping the true God, which they had fled from, had run away from, and so that's the point that I was trying to make there. Satan pulled off one of the best maneuvers to deceive the world, and it's still working today.
Yeah, and they celebrate Christmas all over the world.
Yeah,
and he's going to do it again with the beast and the false prophet. This time he's going to fake Christ's return.
Right. It'll be a fake Pentecost.
Yep.
A revelation, a new, revival of the church. It'll be done with great miracles and with signs and wonders, and people will believe it just like they believe this story about Christmas.
Yep.
Satan is like a magician. He gets you looking over here, so you're not looking where the trick is.
Right.
And so, to me, that's one of the things I've always thought about with Christmas. Is there so much focus on it, especially with Christians, Jesus is the reason for the season, talking about his birth. And I'm like, why are you so focused on his birth? Because we're told that really for a Christian, it's his death we should be focused on, because it was with his death that opened up the possibility of us being in God's family because we can repent. So now, somebody said, well, but he had to be born first. Well, yeah, but why do you think that there's not a verse in the Bible that says worship Christ's birth? Here's his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
It's because God wants us to focus on the death, because that's what's important to Christians. And Satan, again, gets us looking over here, spending all this energy and time on his birth when we should be focused on his death.
I might just throw this in real quick. You probably know the Puritans, and in most of America for about 200 years, Christmas was outlawed. The Puritans considered too pagan and too rowdy. Actually, the Puritans in England, also for a short while, they got Christmas canceled in England. And that's why Charles Dickens wrote the book, The Christmas Carol, Ah Humbug. It was and of course, England went back to Christmas big time. That book was effective. The reason it's important in America was when George Washington was losing the American Revolution, he attacked across the Potomac on Christmas Day because he knew the other side would have a hangover, because they'd be drunk and they'd be totally surprised. And when he won the victory, then he made some great maneuvers in Trenton, New Jersey, and routed the British. And all of a sudden, 12 to 15,000 American volunteers showed up to say, hey, this fight isn't over. We thought the British had it won, and the war was on. And of course, they won. The point is, Christmas is, or let's say, not celebrating Christmas actually helped America a great deal. One more thing I want to just add. We can skip the two scripts about being greedy and stuff, but this is a time of year when there's an excessive amount of drunk driving, shoplifting, and theft. I remember when I worked at the phone company, we tell the operators, they had about a 2-block walk to get to State Street. There was a part of State Street in Chicago that was off the center of State Street. So it wasn't as well lit and policed. We would tell the women, look, if some thugs come up to you and want your purse, don't freeze and hang on to it, because you may get hurt seriously. The money isn't worth it. And we would tell them that at Christmas time, because that's when it was worse, because it was dark when they got off work because of the way that, and apparently that's when drunken driving and purse snatching went up to its greatest height, was during that season.
Yeah, this is the season when employees do their stealing more than normal because they feel they're obligated to take care of their kids' Christmas presents and things like that. Stores always go through more theft this time of year than any other time of year. It's not a whole lot of good stuff, can you say, other than some, giving and helping of people during this time of year. But then again, I say, why don't you help them in the spring and in the summer when they need it too? Only this time of year when you feel good and it makes you look good. And
Well, one of the most frustrating things for me is this time of the year is supposed to be a Christian celebration. It's what they call it. And when I'm in traffic this time of the year and people trying to run over each
Yeah.
other, you go in a store, they're cutting in front of you like you described earlier. They're grabbing things so that in front of other people, and it's just a melee of greed and selfishness, and I want it, and I want it now, or I want it before you, and I want to get there before you, and I want to leave before you, and I want to be in the line in front of you, all of which is contrary to the teachings of Jesus. That is so, to me, so hypocritical, that it's like you can't see the forest for the trees because it is so blatant. And I see that, and if other people that maybe are looking into this subject can't see that, then you're not really looking.
Yeah. By the way, I want to talk a little bit about Syria, just from a possible prophetic standpoint. Damascus is mentioned in end time prophecies being a real disaster. It's going to happen there, and a lot of people are jumping on it. I don't think we need to worry so much about right this moment. But here's a possibility: the Assad regime was non-religious; they were the Ba'ath Party. It's kind of a dictatorial Islamic non-religious party, and so Assad's people were in it. And his dad got it, and they've ruled Syria for over 50 years. And they allow, since they're non-religious, they allowed the Christians to celebrate Christianity and kind of protected them. When the Arab Spring came, and the revolution got to Syria. Well, the radicals or jihadists, or pure Sunni Arabs, as they would probably say. They killed or chased out all the Christians in the territory they controlled. Syria actually had 3 million Christians up until the Arab Spring, and now it has only a few 100,000. And those few 100,000 are worried. Now that Assad is gone, I'm not saying he was a good guy, but neither side are good. I know that's going to confuse people. Well, there's going to be good guys and bad guys. That's what I call kindergarten thinking about world affairs. But in the Middle East and other places, it's not that way. They're both bad. There's bad in different ways.
Bad and worse.
Yes. I want to remind you this. Do you remember when Jimmy Carter said the Shah of Iran was too dictatorial, and we demanded he leave, and led up these wonderful religious people come in and take over the Khomeinis and the Ayatollahs who were in exile? You realize we went from not so great to horrible, horrible. They've been the sponsors of terrorism. Yep. They've caused all kinds of problems. And the difference this time is the new rebel leader is saying they didn't immediately get, as far as I know at least, get to Damascus and start massacring people. He's even saying things like he's matured from what he was 15 years ago when he was a bloodthirsty jihadist. He's matured. Now, here's what I think. By the way, they were sponsored by Turkey. Erdogan, who's the Turkey prime minister, realized before World War I mean, they lost it when they lost World War I. The Ottoman Empire controlled that whole Middle East place, because they were defeated in World War I and had to give up their empire. He's supporting these guys, militarily trained them and unleashed them at a time when Israel, because of their power, had made their main supporters, Hezbollah and Iran, weak. It was a perfect opportunity. And for some spiritual reason, the Syrian army didn't want to fight. They had no courage. They just melted away. Could this be the beginning of the king of the South? Because from what I have saw online, the new people, they're going to try to be more politically smart. So they're not going to look like such bad guy. But their goal still is to take over Jerusalem and Saudi Arabia. They want to take over the Middle East and create what they would probably consider the ideal Sunni Muslim state. And if their sponsor is Erdogan in Turkey, he might think of himself as, hey, this is step one in me eventually becoming in charge of all this. Turkey was supposed to be secular, but he's cleverly moved them little by little and admitted he's religious. He's no longer just a secular leader.
Yep.
So everybody who's all excited, oh, we got freedom in Syria, I'd be cautious.
Unless you're a Christian. They're already going after them.
And they've also killed a bunch of Kurds already.
Yep.
The Kurds aren't Christians, but they're, I guess, a type of Muslims that they don't like. I don't know. That mess over there is just terrible with the Kurds. And these borders were drawn up by the victors after World War I. They didn't draw them up with any really in-depth knowledge of all those tribal rivalries and mess over there. And I think the way they drew the borders of places like Iraq with three groups that hate each other in the same country, they actually created more instability.
Mm-hmm.
But the mess that came out of World War I is what we're still saddled with.
Yep.
So all I'm saying, everybody's going to be celebrating Assad is gone, and we're going to have wonderful times in Syria. I'd be very cautious.
Oh,
This guy is sneaky.
I just hope we get through till January 20th at this point. I don't, because every day there's something new they're trying to pull. Somebody's pulling something. Now they got drones floating around over in the Northeast. Anybody don't think that our country don't know exactly where the drones came from, who's flying the drones, why the drones are there? That's nuts. We know everything. They're probably even our drones. There's no way we don't know. I'm just saying. We know where the drones are coming from.
And this guy who's the spokesman for the Defense Department, I forgot his name now, dark-haired guy. He was, I guess, brought out there to reassure the public there's nothing to worry about. But after he talked, it got people more worried.
Yeah, of course. I'm telling you, the drones are ours, man. The drones are ours. It's just a distraction for something. You can guarantee that.
Well, but they keep saying, we know they're not a foreign countries. Well, if you don't know anything about them, how can you be so sure?
Yeah, they know because they're theirs.
I hope you're right. I don't know. I no longer trust our government. Do you know they're pulling away fencing off the border to make it much harder and more expensive when Trump comes to finish the wall? That's just wasting taxpayer money.
They're selling it for $5. I mean, they could get more scrap. They could get thousands of dollars scrap for this stuff, and they're selling it for $5 just as kind of an insult. But if I lived down there, I'd be scrapping because that's easy money.
But it's so petty. Assuming that Trump really will finish the wall, why move the material now? You're only going to be in office for another 5 or so weeks. Why mess things up now?
Didn't the governor of Texas say he's going to buy it up and use it? Didn't I hear that somewhere?
Well, they'll probably try not to sell it to him. These people are petty.
Oh, they're crooked and they're petty.
Yeah.
I guess I should be more respectful.
No.
But that's what it looks like. That's just as petty as you can get. Well, anyway, I want to thank everybody. I know we're over time a little bit, but I enjoyed the discussion.
Well, if that's
Certainly
it, anything else we want to add to this?
Stay warm.
Stay warm.
Yeah.
try to stay warm.
Don't be outside late at night.
The brothers
You
in the
gotta get
South try to
outside.
stay out of the snow because they're getting buried up in northern Michigan. I know that.
Yeah.
So I'd say thank you, everyone, for coming. We hope to see you back here again next week. And good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night, Ken.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.